Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 154 of the Prancing Pony podcast where, well, all choices seem ill.
And to be caught between bad puns and terrible singing, the likeliest chance.
Quite.
But folks, go ahead and pull up a bench in the common room, and we'll be right there. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the Man of the West, who mirrors only starlight and moonlight. And I didn't write that. Alan Sisto.
Well, maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I'm happy to sleep until touched by one who speaks words now long forgotten. Well, that didn't come out right either, man.
No, dude, that really did not. No. In fact, I think it's probably best if we just cut to a pre-recorded segment quickly to give us some time to recover from that one.
Probably. Well, today we're bringing you another new installment of The North Wing.
Barlam and Butterbur had a room or two in the North Wing at the Prancing Pony Inn, made special for hobbits. Well, this is our place made special for some of our listeners, to give us a chance to get to know them.
Now, rooms at the North Wing are admittedly fairly hard to come by these days, so only our patrons at the Bombadil's Bequest and Círdan's Contribution tiers are eligible. Now, if you'd like to be one of the next patrons to join us, be sure to check out patreon.com/prancingponypod.
Please do. We've got a waiting list for the North Wing right now, but we'll get to all of those good folks soon, and we will certainly make room for more if necessary.
Soon might be a little bit of a, optimistic exaggeration, but eventually, yes.
We'll get to them all about as quickly as Barlaman will get to your mail.
There you go. Well then, folks, why don't we go ahead and welcome our guest tonight to the North Wing, Dr. Arthur Harrow.
Hello, folks. Nice to be talking to you.
Good to have you with us tonight.
It's wonderful to have you with us.
We always ask kind of the initial question is the same for everybody. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, and then what your loved ones think of all this Tolkien stuff you're into. Do they think you're a total nerd? Do they like it like you do? That sort of thing.
Well, I'm a physician. I grew up mostly in Texas, although I'm originally from the East Coast. I grew up in Houston and went to medical school in Dallas and did further training in Oklahoma. And I am now a physician and educator at a hospital in Baltimore.
Okay.
In addition, I have been reading science fiction and fantasy for, I don't want to admit quite how many years, and been working at listening to the Tolkien professor and going to various moots for 5 or 6 years, which is how I was led to that marvelous cultural institution we refer to as the Prancing Pony podcast. My family is extremely tolerant. My daughters let me read them The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings when they were little kids. My wife has been to moots where I have spoken, and she has not rolled her eyes too loudly. So they tolerate. What can I say?
That's a high level of support right there. Inaudible eye rolls are they're underrated.
To have your spouse, come with you to a moot, I think is something
huge.
I think a lot of people have, some have experienced especially if their spouse is into it, but not everybody has. So that's great.
That's true. Yeah.
And as I said, my literary interests are wide, and part of it is I'm the only person in my medical school that can put supervillain on his resume.
Nice.
Now tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is what happens if you are bored and you Google yourself. And I came across a reference to the Moon Knight comic book. An episode published in 1985, which is right after I graduated from medical school. In medical school, parenthetically, I made no secret of the fact that I liked comic books, and I thought that the villains were more enjoyable than the good guys. And I also gave some talks on ethics. And then I came across this comic book where the villain was a somewhat maddened physician named, and I am not making this up, Dr. Arthur Harrow.
Wow.
Who had used forbidden Nazi research to create an army of anesthetized zombies with which to overrun the earth.
Wow.
And, that's pretty cool. And then some superhero who couldn't possibly understand his work decided to interfere. And the most interesting thing is that when I obtained a copy of this and showed it to my family with the name covered up, so all they saw was a picture and not the identifier, my daughter looked at it and looked at me and said, "That is a freaky resemblance." And to this day, I have no idea how the people at Marvel came up with the idea of that character who looked like that with that name and those interests, because it's just kind of resonant.
It is. I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at the page, and we'll include this in our show notes if that's okay with you.
That's fine by me. It's out there in the public domain.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. That is fascinating.
And I will only say to that, bwahaha.
And may you defeat Moon Knight if you ever face him again.
Well,
Well, Sean, that may top it all. He's actually appeared in a comic book.
yeah, that's better than any of our questions, but we'll keep going through ours and we'll see what fun stuff we come up with. Arthur, the question we ask everybody who comes to the Prancing Pony: when and how did you first discover Tolkien's works? What was your experience like, and why do you keep coming back?
Well, to answer the first part, as those who know me might guess, it is a little bit of an odd story. It was the mid-1960s. I was a little kid. We were on vacation somewhere, and one of my brothers had left this paperback book lying around, which caught my eye, and it had on the cover this exploding volcano and what looked like a bunch of dragons and weird guys running around on the cover. Those of us of a certain age, of course, will recognize this as the Ballantine paperback cover of The Lord of the Rings. The Return of the King. So I opened it up, say, okay, what's in this? Ooh, this sounds neat. Mount Doom. So the very first piece of Tolkien I ever read was that chapter. Some people would explain why I have such everything I say about Tolkien almost sounds backwards, but and that was my introduction to Tolkien. I read The Lord of the Rings first, and then I found The Hobbit, and I keep going back to it. And I will admit I reread it or listen to it in audio form almost every year.
Wow!
Because I always find something new to say. Not always something serious, but something new, whether it's as mundane as the realization that the cats of Queen Beruthiel, who can always find their way home in the dark, must be the last children of Tevildo to trouble this unhappy world, or the logic that leads us to conclude that Tom Bombadil is really Ungoliant and that Thranduil is really Maglor. There is textual support for this, but I always find something interesting and something fun to say about it.
That's still one of my favorite fan theories about Tom Bombadil. So,
oh yeah, it's got to be Ungoliant. I love that.
And Goldberry is Morgoth, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's the first step, because they say, Tom says, the Dark Lord came from outside. A shadow seems to pass over the window, and next thing you know, Goldberry comes in from outside. You can't make it any plainer than that.
No, I suppose not. All right. Well, you have been a very active member of our community for quite some time. You comment on Facebook just about every week, and you say, frankly, some of the funniest stuff that we come across. Your mastery of puns is like a boss level goal for each of us.
Y'all are far too kind.
We're not worthy.
That's right. How often do we just go, oh, that was wonderful. How did we not think of that? And it's because we're not you. We are, of course, glad to have you around. We know you've been to a lot of myth moots. You mentioned that you found us through one of those moots. How did you find your way into our online Tolkien community?
I think that there was somebody who was telling me that there was this really interesting podcast that was sometimes a little bit tongue-in-cheek that might be the sort of thing that I would go for.
They must have known you well.
Yeah, and so I listened and I said, okay, I got to go back to the beginning, because, of course, that's a very good place to start. And went back and
Indeed
started at the beginning of the series and then caught up. And now every Sunday I'm there listening and making notes in order to provide appropriate comments as soon as I've gotten to the end of it, because there have been times I wanted to make comments earlier, and then I listen and say, oh, they've already gotten to that, so I'm not going to say that. But that's how I got to you guys.
All right. Well, what's your favorite thing about going to moots?
Number one, meeting with like-minded people who will understand my casual cultural references and jokes and odd theories. When I try to make a Tolkien reference at work, sometimes I have to stop and explain it and say, do you know The Lord of the Rings? And the young person will say, oh, I've been meaning to get around to watching that. And I have to explain, no, it's not something you watch. It's something you read. There are times when it is a pleasure to be with people of my own kind.
Yeah, boy, that is true.
Absolutely get that. Yeah, there's a lot of that, I think, going around, and it's really nice when we get those chances to be around like-minded people, the people you don't have to explain yourself around.
Yeah.
Well, while we're on the topic of books, what's your favorite book in the Legendarium and why? And what's your favorite non-Legendarium work by Tolkien, if you have one?
Yeah.
Okay. My favorite book, I'm going to say, is going to be The Silmarillion for a very specific reason that is age specific. As I mentioned before, I first read Tolkien in the mid 60s. And as I got older and talked with other people and was in high school and writing book reports every year on The Lord of the Rings until my teachers were sick of telling me it's not really literature because there's not a disaffected anti-hero. And kept coming across things, references to Theoden looked like Orome the Great in the Battle of the Valar when the world was young, or the great elf friends of old, Hurin and Turin. I'm going, who are these people? We were given very little information. It was some stuff. And when the Silmarillion came out, that was the first new Tolkien in our lives. And we devoured it. I was a junior in college, and it's like read within a week. And I have to say that when I hear people saying, well, you know, the Silmarillion is good, but, you know, the kingdoms of Beleriand and the princes of the Noldor, and, you know, there's no action. And I'm thinking, my God, we did not have anything. We didn't care if it was a stretch. It was just naming names and giving geographic descriptions. This was new Tolkien. We could not put it down. And so that's a very meaningful book for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Non-Legendarium, in terms of emotional jolt and impact, I got to go with Leaf by Niggle.
Yeah, that's my favorite too. I totally get you on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is your favorite memory of a Tolkien-related activity? For example, my wife and I once read the books out loud together. Sean used to read the books to his kids when they were newborns. What's your favorite Tolkien activity to remember?
I think probably, I mean, there's so many, and it's hard to pick one, but I'd like to think it was reading it to my kids and I mean, I cannot do this professionally like some people, but trying to do the voices.
Oh, yeah. We can't do that professionally like some people either.
No, that's why we do it on a podcast.
That's why we do it here.
But trying to individualize each voice and watching, you know, and it's different reading it to kids than reading it to adults.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The wide eyes, the ooh, that's neat, such a rewarding experience. It is not necessarily that much more meaningful than the first time I spoke at a moot or the first time that I picked up, as I said, the Silmarillion. But I have to say that I give that one the edge.
How old were your kids when you read it to them? I'm just curious. We get this question a lot. You know, what's a good age to read it to the kids?
They were, I don't know, in the 5 to 6 year old range, old enough to listen and old enough to ask questions. And you read it slowly and don't talk too fast. And it's not beyond their ability. Now they're not going to at that age get academic nuances that we spend so much time talking about, but it's a fun story.
Yeah.
And it gets them started. And maybe in a year or two, they say, now that I'm a little older, I'm remembering that. And Daddy, what about that? What do you think about this? I said, well, let me tell you, but let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think that age is too young.
That's great. Yeah. I've been thinking about going back to The Hobbit with my kids now that they're old enough to, especially my son is about to be 7. And I think he might be old enough to really get into The Hobbit this time around. I've done it a couple of times, but there's just not a lot of recall.
No.
At the younger ages when I read it to them. So
that's true.
Well, great. Well, why don't we go ahead and move on to the lightning round now? And these are going to be quick questions, quick answers. So
hopefully
first,
quick answers, right?
We'll try. First question, who's your favorite Hobbit?
Pippin.
All right.
What's
the one place in Middle-earth that you wish you could visit?
The last homely house and a luncheon bar in Rivendell. First homely house if you're facing the other direction.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. There ought to be 2 entrances with a different name on each sign.
That's a very good point, Sean. I like that.
All right. Here's the big one. Balrog wings, actual or metaphorical?
Vestigial.
Ooh.
I just did a spit take. That was really well played, sir.
Like it. Why did the chicken cross the road? Under the mistaken belief that the Balrog did not have wings, it could not fly over the traffic and catch it. Let us weep for the
All right, fair enough.
And I am not making this up. I was at a store recently and took a picture on the salad bar where they said they had monster wings, and I couldn't help but think of Balrog Wild Wings.
Rock wildlings. Come on in. One wing will feed your entire group of 6 people. Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. What happened to the Entwives?
What happened to the Entwives? They, an interesting question. I suspect that they may have formed a book club and just got so caught up in it that they forgot where they were.
Totally believable.
Fair enough.
All right,
All
Sean,
right.
last one.
And finally, one does not simply walk into Mordor, but if you could, who would you rather have at your side, Legolas or Gimli?
Actually, I would rather have the most famous cat in the universe with me, because he would no spider is going to stand up to that. An alternate would be Arwen, because everybody talks about why didn't they just have the eagle fly over and drop the ring in. Arwen looks like Luthien. She could show up at the Black Gate, say, "Hey, buddy, remember me? I don't need the pooch to take you down now. Get out of here."
Right, there you go.
Do you want me to sing? You want me to sing? I'll sing.
That's right. Don't push
I'll sing
me,
a
man.
song of power. I'll tear this tower down.
Absolutely.
That's right. By the way, I love how when we ask you a question in a lightning round that says, who would you rather have at your side, A or B, your answers are X and Z.
Yeah.
I love it.
One must think outside the box.
And one of them, of course, references to
There
Vildo.
you go.
So there you go.
Totally fair enough. Well, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine you not getting a Tevildo reference in, frankly. So I would have been disappointed if you hadn't.
I think I got 2 tonight.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, despite the fact that you didn't answer Legolas or Gimli, we still believe these are great answers. We really do. So thank you, Arthur. We have truly enjoyed having you here at the North Wing. I have to admit, this has been one that we've been looking forward to. But it is time for all of us to head back over to the common room and join the rest of the listeners.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and give my regards to Mr. Butterbeer.
We certainly will.
We shall. Thank you again, Arthur, and we will see you back at the next Questions After Nightfall, if not sooner.
Absolutely.
And now we return you folks to the podcast already in progress.
Well, thank you, Alan.
You're welcome. And now let's get back to the book, because we are all about the books here at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
We bring you other Tolkien stuff from time to time, but at heart, Alan and I are fans of Tolkien's books and books about Tolkien. That's our passion.
Indeed it is. And as you know, we read a lot of books in preparation for the show every week. Mm-hmm. And if you'd like to get your hands on a book that we've mentioned, you're going to want to check out the official library page of our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where we have links to every book we've ever mentioned on the show.
And there's a lot of other stuff on our website, too. There's show notes and book links specific to each episode, outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and some other little extras. You'll also find a link to our new online storefront at teespring.com/stores/PPP, where you can find shirts, mugs, stickers, and other great Prancing Pony Podcast gear. So be sure to check that out.
Definitely. And now, let's hurry. We have to reach the doors before sunset.
No, those dwarves and their doors. All right.
So we're going to go ahead and start right where we left off. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up with this first opening passage. That day, the weather changed again. Almost, hint, hint, as if it was at the command of some power that had no longer any use for snow, since they had retreated from the pass. A power that wished now to have a clear light in which things that moved in the wild could be seen from far away. The wind had been turning through north to northwest during the night, and now it failed. The clouds vanished southwards, and the sky was opened, high and blue. As they stood upon the hillside, ready to depart, a pale sunlight gleamed over the mountain tops. "We must reach the doors before sunset," said Gandalf, "or I fear we shall not reach them at all. It is not far, but our path may be winding, for here Aragorn cannot guide us. He has seldom walked in this country, and only once have I been under the west wall of Moria, and that was long ago."
All right. So we start off with the weather changing. Now it's clear.
As it does. As it does.
As it does. As we say in Texas, if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So now the Fellowship is highly visible.
Mm-hmm.
And we get this hint in the text that this may be at the command of some power.
Yeah, that's not subtle, is it?
That, don't we? No.
Yeah, I mean, that's
not at all.
Pretty clear, as if, and what the power even wishes, that now that we don't need to stop them anymore, we just need to see them. Yeah.
That it's specifically a power with sentience or agency, something that has a desire to see them in clear light.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we talked in the last chapter about how Caradhras seems to be sort of anthropomorphized, right?
Oh,
We
yeah.
thought that maybe it's that maybe there's something in the mountain itself,
Right.
that
The
it wasn't
mountain defeated
necessarily under
them.
the power.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And that maybe it wasn't necessarily under the power of Sauron or Saruman, that it might be just some sort of force of nature that didn't want them
Right.
crossing.
But this certainly suggests otherwise.
This sounds different, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. Because Carothers wouldn't care whether or not they're visible to some other entity. As long as you're off my mountain, I'm done.
Yeah, I don't think that Tolkien's going to put in a suggestion like that and put in such a clear statement of intent that it wants to be able to see things moving from far away, unless there's something behind it. Now, who it is, we don't know.
True. But what Gandalf does know is the attacks won't stop. We've got to get to the doors
Right.
tonight, or we're never going to get there.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and in fact,
Unfortunately,
only he knows how to get there, right?
yeah, that's true. That's true. And he has been thinking ahead. He's actually had them heading in the right direction already.
Yeah, it's true. Smart man. Well, wizard and all that.
Smart wizard. Smart, not quite a man. Yeah.
Good wizard. Who's a good wizard?
Yeah, good boy.
Mithrandir, you're such a good boy. Oh, goodness. Boromir, of course, understandably so, I have to say. He's a little bit, fatalistic here. Like, neither of these is really good. I don't know. Should I hope that Gandalf finds what he's looking for? Or, we're going to get there and find that we're going to be eaten by wolves anyway against closed doors. I don't know. Really, all choices are bad choices.
Yeah, a little bit of that Germanic fatalism there.
No doubt.
That no hope, but I mean, he's going to do it anyway, isn't he?
Oh, of course. He's going to die doing his duty is kind of what he's imagining happening here.
He says this miserable stuff, and then he says, well, lead on.
Yeah,
we're going to
do it. Do your thing, man. I got you, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, he is Boromir, so, he's got Gandalf's back
Boromir.
here.
Yeah. It's interesting that you see in Boromir that he's just such that Germanic ethos, isn't he?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
We talked about how he's got that kind of Beorhtnothish chivalry, that kind of nonsense chivalry.
Beorhtnothish.
And it's a bit of a mouthful.
I never thought his name would be turned into an adjective.
Into an adjective. But then he's also got this kind of sort of the more noble Germanic thing of like, there's not much hope, but we're going to do what we have to do anyway.
That's right. Absolutely.
Cool.
Even if the circle of light is surrounded, we're not going to go down without a fight.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I may end up getting caught between wolves and the wall, but let's do it. Yeah. He gets to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Come at me, bro.
That's right. Come at me, wolf. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and have you pick up with Gimli, taking the lead with Gandalf here. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's getting pretty excited here.
Mm-hmm.
Gimli now walked ahead by the wizard's side. So eager was he to come to Moria. Together they led the company back towards the mountains. The only road of old to Moria from the west had lain along the course of a stream, the Siranon, that ran out from the feet of the cliffs near where the doors had stood. But either Gandalf was astray, or else the land had changed in recent years, for he did not strike the stream where he looked to find it, only a few miles southwards from their start. The morning was passing towards noon, and still the company wandered and scrambled in a barren country of red stones. Nowhere could they see any gleam of water or hear any sound of it. All was bleak and dry. Their hearts sank. They saw no living thing, and not a bird was in the sky. But what the night would bring if it caught them in that lost land, none of them cared to think.
There's a cheery thought.
Yeah.
Barren. Empty.
Yeah.
Not even the sound of water.
Yeah, the quiet and the barrenness of this place reminds me a little bit of the approach to Mirkwood in Chapter 7 of The Hobbit.
Oh, yeah.
I actually have that here if you don't mind me reading from it.
Yeah, please do, by all means.
As soon as it was light, they could see the forest coming, as it were, to meet them, or waiting for them like a black and frowning wall before them. The land began to slope up, and it seemed to the hobbit that a silence began to draw in upon them. Birds began to sing less. There were no more deer. Not even rabbits were to be seen. By the afternoon they had reached the eaves of Mirkwood, and were resting almost beneath the great overhanging boughs of its outer trees.
Wow, yeah, you're not kidding. That similar sort of foreboding, ominous emptiness. Yeah,
right before they get to this, this place that
This
is going to be
wall.
a barrier for them. They're going to, that's right. We actually get a frowning wall in Mirkwood, and we
Yeah.
get some language similar to that
we
later
sure
on
do.
here.
Boy, you're
So-
not kidding. That's a really good catch. I don't think I was reminded of that, probably because I'm thinking more about the Watcher and all the stuff that's going to be coming. But You know, that's part of the problem with having read this 8,000 times is it's very
you start
hard
to anticipate
you really
exciting
do.
things that you know are coming. Yeah.
It's like,
there's
oh,
a
I know why
tendency,
there's
I
no
think, for all
water.
of us.
You know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like you said, this sort of ominous quiet that is sort of foreboding.
When nature's that quiet, something's up. You know,
Yeah,
no birds, no sound, no water, nothing. Yeah.
Kind of like my kids. I know when it's too quiet upstairs. I know
You're in
they're
trouble
up to
when
no
it's
good.
quiet. That's right. Yeah. Well, speaking of water, Gimli actually does find it first. He's the one who points out that, there's this hardly a trickle of water. And so, we know something's going on here. Why in the world is what's normally a pretty, powerful, swift and noisy brook, as Gandalf would say? Why is it down to nothing but just a trickle?
Mm-hmm.
We'll find that out later. But, Gimli's the one who is in the lead, really. He's the one who finds that. And then Gandalf is able to point out, well, this was the Saran and this was the gate stream, but we have to keep moving.
Right.
So.
Yeah. We're running late. Let's go. Let's keep going.
Come on, everyone, get going.
Move along.
We've got 6:00 reservations. If we're not there, we'll lose our table. Right meat off the bone. The dwarven barbecue they're going to have there.
Oh, that's
right
true. Yeah,
off
that
the
Gimli
bone.
was expecting. Yeah.
My cousin Balin will give us a royal welcome. Yeah.
There's some barbecued dwarves down there.
Oh, yeah. That's not what you want. Oh, wow. Not what I was thinking about a dwarven barbecue. That's a disturbing thought.
No. But, Shadow and Flame.
Shadow
Durin's
and
Bane.
Flame.
Durin's Bane is what I named my barbecue pit. So.
Oh, there you go. I love it. And you know what's cool about that? Your barbecue pit doesn't have wings either.
That's true.
I mean, it might. Does it have little side tables though? Maybe
it does have the little side tables. Yeah,
you got to get rid of those, man. Those look like wings, even if they're not functional. You can't call it Durin's Bane if it's got wings.
But they only look like wings. That's the thing.
Oh, are they metaphorical wings? Can you actually set a plate on them?
Yeah, they're not actual physical wings.
It's just your imagination. You put like a spatula on there and it just falls to the ground. Wait a minute. It's a table of smoke and flame.
Now I'm going to have to take a picture of my barbecue pit and post it on Instagram.
You will.
So
you will have
can see
to. Absolutely.
The barbecue pit.
I love it. That's really its name. That is just awesome.
Shadow and Flame. It is now.
Yeah. If it wasn't before, it sure is.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the next reading. Gandalf's talking about the change in the geography of the area. So he says, "Indeed, things have changed," said Gandalf, "but there is no mistaking the place. There is all that remains of the Stair Falls. If I remember right, there was a flight of steps cut in the rock at their side, but the main road wound away left and climbed with several loops up to the level ground at the top. There used to be a shallow valley beyond the falls, right up to the walls of Moria, and the Sarannon flowed through it with the road beside it. Let us go and see what things are like now." They found the stone steps without difficulty, and Gimli sprang swiftly up them, followed by Gandalf and Frodo. When they reached the top, they saw that they could go no further that way, and the reason for the drying up of the gate stream was revealed. Behind them, the sinking sun filled the cool western sky with glimmering gold. Before them stretched a dark, still lake. Neither sky nor sunset was reflected on its sullen surface. The Sarannon had been dammed and had filled all the valley. Beyond the ominous water were reared vast cliffs, their stern faces pallid in the fading light, final and impassable. No sign of gate or entrance, not a fissure or crack could Frodo see in the frowning stone. "There are the walls of Moria," said Gandalf, pointing across the water. "And there the gate stood once upon a time, the Elven Door at the end of the road from Holland by which we have come. But this way is blocked. None of the company, I guess, will wish to swim this gloomy water at the end of the day. It has an unwholesome look." Yeah, well, so do I.
Yeah.
I mean, really, anyway.
If this was not an ominous passage before, it is now.
Yeah. Here, let's turn the foreboding up to level 10, please. Maybe even 11. I think this is a Spinal Tap moment. It goes to 11.
It goes to 11.
Yeah, this is serious.
It's like, how much more gloomy could it be?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is none.
None more gloomy. I love that. That's awesome.
But, even before the passage you read, we saw how tired the company was. They're trudging along.
Footsore,
they take a
doggedly trudging,
Yeah, a brief halt and a hasty meal. They don't really have time to get much rest at all. It's just, hey, let's get the bare necessities and keep moving.
Yeah, well, they got the wolves after them still. They know, that they've got to get to the doors before dark. And, and just barely they're going to make it. So,
yeah.
the actual passage. They get around the corner and they see the site of the stair falls. Now, just a quick comment here. The cliff is listed as 5 fathoms high. Now, that's a little less than 30 feet. It's about 9 or 10 meters. So just to give you an idea of the height of the cliff. It's not hundreds of feet high, but it is significantly large.
Right. Thank you for that. I can never remember exactly what a fathom is.
Yeah, about 6 feet.
About 6 feet. Yeah,
a little less than that, yeah.
I should just make a mental note of that.
Mm-hmm.
But moving on, Gandalf observes the stair falls. He points out that they're reduced. He remembers the geography of the road.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does.
And describes that to the group.
Yeah. Then they reach the top of the stairs, right? And that's when they discover this, the reason why the river's dried out. There's now this lake. It's been dammed up, the river has.
Mm-hmm.
But this lake isn't just an ordinary lake. There's no reflections. You get this sullen surface. It's interesting that there's some alliteration here. Sky nor sunset reflected on its sullen surface. To really, again,
you're right.
Catch it when you read it out loud. But that's a pretty...
little bit more of that music.
Gloomy. Yeah, exactly. But talk about gloomy, right? You look at the lake and it's not even a pretty lake.
No.
I mean, usually that kind of thing. A lake in the mountains? Oh, pretty. No, not this one.
Right. But not this one. And, there's a lot of description of nature here that borders on personification. We've got the sullen surface of the lake. We get the stern faces of the cliffs.
Right.
We get a reference to frowning stone.
Earlier
Earlier in the chapter, we saw that the mountains frowned. And also that passage from the Mirkwood chapter I just read from the Hobbit had some similar language in there. A little later, we're going to get the slimy arm of the lake. Now, none of these are actual personification in the way that, Caradhras the Cruel was sort of personified.
Yeah.
But I do think these are really interesting descriptions because it does sort of give the landscape itself a kind of personality, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. I mean, it's not a friendly one, but it definitely gives the sense of it being its own character and of it having some sort of, not agency like Caradhras, like you said. It doesn't have that sort of level of personification, but But
it is kind of an antagonist in its way.
It is, exactly. It has an enmity towards the fellowship, towards the company.
Yes, I like that. Yeah.
Definitely.
So then Gandalf points out the walls of Moria. Gates over there, but we're going to have to go around.
Yeah.
And notice that Gandalf says the Elven Door at the end of the road from Holland.
Right.
In the Treason of Isengard, we learned that there were actually originally 2 entrances to Moria. There was this Elven Door, and then there was a Dwarven Door further south.
That's right. Christopher Tolkien says that the idea that there were 2 distinct western entrances to Moria had appeared in the original version, where Gandalf said, "There were 2 secret gates on the western side, though the chief entrance was on the east." And Gandalf's words in the present passage derive from this, although in the context where there is no Dwarven Door, the Elven Door is understood in relation to what Gandalf said subsequently, that the west door was made chiefly for the elves' use in their traffic with the Lords of Moria. So interesting that there used to be 2 separate entrances in Tolkien's mind.
That
maybe
is
the,
very
maybe the Dwarven Door
I
was just
imagine one was shorter than the other. Yeah.
Right. I knew we were going there.
We were both right there.
4 foot high and 3 may walk abreast, right? Maybe it's a little like the Erebor. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, were there segregated entrances?
Know. Isn't that interesting?
Was that intentional?
I mean, they were friends, but they weren't really friends. Like, I'm not going to go in your door, man. I don't know.
Maybe so.
It could be.
I don't know.
It could be. And that would allow the dwarves to shut down the Elven Door if, to bar it if there were ever a conflict with the elves. I don't know.
That could be, which makes it very interesting that he got rid of the 2 separate doors and just made this door the only one.
That's
from
right.
the west. It kind of underscores the friendship that there was
really
between
does.
elves.
It strengthens that.
Segregated entrances don't exactly.
It doesn't sound like they're very good friends. I'm so glad you're my friend. No. Could you go in the side door, please?
No. Could you just go around that side, please?
And be sure to take your shoes off first, man. I mean,
I don't want anybody to see us coming in together.
That's right. That's just terrible. Yeah. I like what Tolkien did by bringing it back down to just the one door.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Gimli, though, the first thing he points out is, what? Oh.
Well, Gimli points out that, even if there weren't the lake there, they can't get Bill the Pony up that stair.
No, that's true. Yeah, not a chance. And Gandalf's like, well, even if we can get him up the stairs, he's not going to be able to go into the mines.
Yeah.
Not a chance. He's a horse. You can't do that. And they've known that all along. I mean, at least Gandalf has. I don't think anybody else has necessarily thought that far ahead. In fact, Frodo
specifically says he hadn't thought about that, and he is concerned about Sam.
Well, yeah.
Obviously
he's Frodo, and he loves his friend. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course.
And Gandalf has some sympathy. It's not like he's like, well, you should have known better. He says, I'm sorry. He's been a useful companion. It goes to my heart to turn him adrift.
Mm.
He would have preferred no animal at all, but we have to let him go. This is what we thought we were going to have to do. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting. Gandalf says he feared all along that we would be obliged to take this road. Remember, they didn't know that they were going to go through Moria. So,
no.
When they left Rivendell, there was a chance that they could have taken Bill with them.
And certainly taking Bill over Caradhras would have made, a much easier journey if the snow hadn't been so oppressive. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But as it stands, no, they can't take him. And
no, they can't.
That is very sad because, as Frodo points out, and Gandalf sort of hints at, Sam is not going to take this well.
This is going to be a blow to Sam's heart, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to find that out soon enough. But first, I'm going to have you read this kind of closer look at the lake itself.
Okay. The day was drawing to its end, and cold stars were glinting in the sky high above the sunset, when the company, with all the speed they could, climbed up the slopes and reached the side of the lake. In breadth, it looked to be no more than 2 or 3 furlongs at the widest point. How far it stretched away southward, they could not see in the failing light, but its northern end was no more than half a mile from where they stood, and between the stony ridges that enclosed the valley and the water's edge, there was a rim of open ground. They hurried forward, for they had still a mile or 2 to go before they could reach the point on the far shore that Gandalf was making for, and then he had still to find the doors. When they came to the northernmost corner of the lake, they found a narrow creek that barred their way. It was green and stagnant, thrust out like a slimy arm towards the enclosing hills. Gimli strode forward undeterred and found that the water was shallow, no more than ankle deep at the edge. Behind him they walked in file, threading their way with care, for under the weedy pools were sliding and greasy stones, and footing was treacherous. Frodo shuddered with disgust at the touch of the dark, unclean water on his feet. As Sam, the last of the company, led Bill up onto the dry ground on the far side, there came a soft sound, a swish, followed by a plop, as if a fish had disturbed the still surface of the water. Turning quickly, they saw ripples, black-edged with shadow in the waning light. Great rings were widening outwards from a point far out in the lake. There was a bubbling noise, and then silence. The dusk deepened, and the last gleams of the sunset were veiled in cloud.
Yeah, foreboding. I think maybe earlier it was a 10, now it's an 11. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely at 11 now.
Yeah, we're really at the maximum foreboding level at this point.
Yeah.
The bubbling noise and,
That's just plain creepy, even if you don't know what's coming.
Yeah, yeah. I doubt it's like, a natural hot spring underneath the lake. I don't think that's what the bubbling is being,
Nope.
So just some geography here. Earlier we talked about fathoms. Now we're talking about furlongs, right? Now a furlong is about 220 yards. So we're looking at about 500 yards wide. So for Americans, that's 5 football fields wide. It's a little over a quarter of a mile. So it's a pretty sizable, you can see the other side.
Right.
But it is a long way away.
So a furlong is 220 yards.
That's correct.
You said.
Yeah, furlong
and
is
a fathom is 6 feet. Don't confuse your furlongs and your fathoms, folks.
No,
you'll end up with a tiny little Stonehenge like Spinal Tap.
That's a very good point. Or a massive one. You'll end up building things that are, furlong sized.
Yeah. we want the arches to be 6 furlongs high. What? Okay, sure.
Okay.
That's what you want.
Well, not a problem. What's a half a mile between friends? All right. So another thing that we see here is that they're obviously near the northern end of this new lake, because we see that the southern end can't be seen, right? That's the text tells us that. But then the northern end was only about a half a mile or so away. So it may only be 500 yards wide, but it's, exceptionally long. We just don't know the overall length. So it's a big lake.
But still a mile or 2 to go before they get to the other side where they need to look for the doors. They still don't even know where the doors are.
Right.
So they've got, a bit of a search in front of them.
As
they get up there, they discover a source of the lake, this green, stagnant creek.
Ugh.
And Frodo's disgust as this dark, unclean water touches his feet. That sends a chill through your body.
Such a diva. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I know. You're right.
Ew.
I know.
Yeah.
Is this bottled water? I only let bottled water touch my feet.
Oh, man.
Oh, goodness. Sorry.
The idea of Frodo is that.
I know. sort
Some
of
new babes and
demanding.
bottled water. Yeah.
I need only blue M&Ms in the bowl of my hotel room.
Right.
All the complicated contract writers. Oh man. Anyway, sorry about that. We digress.
This is just ugly stuff.
It is. Oh, and you can kind of feel it too. You know, this idea about the weedy pools and the greasy stones, and anybody who's ever walked into a little river or a lake, a pond, I should say, up in the mountains, you know what they're talking about. I mean, you can feel it. You can feel the rock shifting under your feet. You can feel the moss and the kind of that green slime, and how slick it is and how easy it is to fall. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and then, of course, as Sam crosses, we get what we talked about earlier in terms of the foreboding. We get this, the disturbance on the still surface of the water, the swish, the ripples, and the little bubbling noise.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm only creeped out because I know what it is, but,
I don't know. It's pretty creepy
it's
anyway.
Pretty creepy,
Again, it's kind of like some of that Mirkwood creepiness where you don't really know what it is yet. Remember Mirkwood has all the... I don't have the passage in front of me, but don't we get some description of like the smelly fungus and things like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's kind of like that. It's kind of icky, and it's not a fun place to be. It's not a pleasant place at all.
No.
And so that is strangely foreboding.
That is, no doubt about it.
But they do reach the other side.
Yeah, they do.
And they hug this cliff. They eventually find these two huge holly trees.
Yeah.
And I
Big
love
ones.
this moment because, before we get to those two big holly trees, we see a bunch of dead holly trees. We see these trees rotting in the shallows.
Yeah.
Now, remember in the previous chapter at Eregion, we saw holly as this symbol of life and goodness persisting in, winter or darkness.
Right.
And here, as you're approaching, at first it seems like, oh man, even the holly, the symbol of purity that we had in the last chapter, it seems like even the holly is defeated.
Right.
But not quite, because there are still these two big holly trees that are still
ones.
strong and living.
Mm-hmm.
And it tells us that, not everything is unwholesome, even here, even now.
That's right.
They're almost kind of like sentinel pillars, almost like they're kind of keeping watch on this bleak scene. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they'll be the last things to go, so to speak, in this particular region. And that's actually where I'm going to go ahead and pick up. We're going to learn a little bit about the use of these doors, and Gandalf's going to give us some history here.
All right.
Well, here we are at last, said Gandalf. Here the elven way from Holland ended. Holly was the token of the people of that land, and they planted it here to mark the end of their domain. For the west door was made chiefly for their use in their traffic with the lords of Moria. Those were happier days when there was still close friendship at times between folk of different race, even between dwarves and elves. It was not the fault of the dwarves that the friendship waned, said Gimli.
I have not heard that it was the fault of the elves, said Legolas.
I've heard both, said Gandalf, and I will not give judgment now. But I beg you two, Legolas and Gimli, at least to be friends, and to help me. I need you both. The doors are shut and hidden, and the sooner we find them, the better. Night is at hand.
I love Gandalf's handling of that. Basically, shut up. It's pretty
Come
much
on,
what he
guys,
tells
just
them.
stop.
Knock it off, you two.
Just stop. Just like with your kids.
I know. Do I have to break you two up?
Yeah. Knock
Stop
it off
touching him.
back there.
Stop touching him.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. So we get a little bit of the history lesson, don't we?
Yeah, a little bit about how those were happier days. There used to be close friendship between the dwarfs and the elves, and I think it's another one of those signs that this is sort of a world in decline, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
There used to be happiness. Now there's not. Now there's bickering, which we see
Exactly.
we
Immediately.
see firsthand some of that bickering.
That's right. Oh yeah. I also thought it was interesting that he distinguishes between the friendship of people of different races, but it's especially noticeable. He says friendship at times between folk of different races, even between dwarves and elves, as though those would be the two that would be the least likely to have friendship.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's, like
between
between men and
if those two
dwarves-
races could get along, then anybody could get along back then.
Right. It's more noticeable. It's more indicative of the happier days because these two groups of people never get along. So the fact that they were getting along is especially noteworthy. Yeah.
Now, is that meant to be some sort of comment on their nature? Like just, hey, dwarves and elves are like oil and water. They just never get along. Or is it more a reference to just how bad things are right now?
I think it's
You
a
know?
little bit of both. I mean, we got to go all the
Mhm.
way back to of Ale and Yavanna to talk about that. But
That's true.
when Iluvatar says to Ale, "Okay, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and grant the dwarves sentience and independence. They won't be automatons like you'd made them." But he pointed out there will be enmity
Yeah, that's true.
between your children and the chosen children,
Mm-hmm.
children of my choice and children of my adoption, as
That's a
Iluvatar
good
tells
point.
him.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's always going to be that enmity, which is why, well, that's why I always struggle with some of the things that we see in those in those movies that shall remain unnamed, because there's true enmity between them. This isn't the same as ethnicities among humans, where all the only difference is skin color and the DNA is the same. These are totally different creatures, different species, and they were made as such. So, anyway, don't get me off on that topic.
No, I know. I won't. I won't. I won't feed that fire.
No, please
I
do
mean,
not feed that fire.
I mean, it's my issues with it were a little different. I just thought it was
Well,
poorly written.
not to mention poor writing, but yeah, I mean, there's that too. I'm just talking a philosophical concept. I mean,
Yeah.
if somebody comes to me with the premise, "Hey, what about if we do this?" I'm not going to say, "Well, if you write it well." I mean, I'm going to say, "Wait a minute, what?"
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I got you.
Yeah. So,
But hey, Gimli and Legolas at least can be
Yeah.
friends, right? They can
and
at least
that's
be
kind of the
friends
beginning of
now.
that, I think. Right here is Gandalf saying, "Okay, now it's time." We saw earlier, what was it when the two of them were walking together, and you noticed that, and we were like, "Oh, Gimli and Legolas coming up together. That's a good sign."
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like Gimli's attacking Legolas. You can see him kind of like side-eyeing Legolas on this comment. It wasn't the fault of the dwarves, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, thumb
Yeah.
pointing to Legolas, that the friendship
Yeah,
waned.
this is serious passive aggression here on
It
both
is.
their parts.
That's true. It is very passive-aggressive. And Gandalf's having absolutely none of it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see that Gandalf's reason here isn't, "Hey, be friends because really we should all be friends." It's, "Look, I need you guys to stop bickering because I need your help. I need the two of you."
Yeah. You don't have to be, and anybody who's ever had a job or,
Yeah.
been in the military, been on a
Oh, yeah.
project with, you don't have to be friends, but
No,
you got
don't have to
got
be
work to do,
buddies, but you
and
got to be
gotta
teammates.
get along.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
But speaking about that friendship, we don't learn much more about it here in this text. But I want to look at Unfinished Tales, specifically the history of Galadriel and Celeborn, just for a brief moment. There we learn that, quote, "Celebrimbor had an almost dwarvish obsession with crafts, and he soon became the chief artificer of Eregion, entering into a close relationship with the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, among whom his greatest friend was Narvi." And I love this. The text goes on to say that both elves and dwarves had great profit from this association, so that Eregion became far stronger and Khazad-dûm far more beautiful than either would have done alone. Oh,
Boy,
that's what it's about, right?
It is, and that's a
Mutually
theme that we've seen all
beneficial.
the way back in season 1 in the Silmarillion. This idea
Absolutely.
that all these races, when they work in harmony with each other, they create
They both benefit.
far more beautiful. They both benefit.
Yeah.
It's like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
when they work together, they create something still more beautiful. It's kind of like something like a Menegroth,
Mm-hmm.
and that's cool. That's really
It
cool.
really is.
And by that same token, every member of this company has their role to play, and Gandalf needs everybody to do their part.
Yeah, that's
Even
right.
these two who can't seem to get along.
Not yet, at least, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can't have a fellowship of just 7 people. I mean, we really don't have very many people to begin with, especially since 3 of them are Merry, Pippin, and Sam.
Aw,
I guess
That's
Sam's
harsh.
useful, but Merry and
it's
Pippin
not
are just-
inaccurate, but it's hard.
they're kind of luggage at this point. So
They will do great things before the end.
they will indeed. Let's go ahead and get into the mines. We're going to go ahead and say goodbye to Bill, too. So I'm going to go ahead and have you pick up then, right here with Gandalf having broken the news to Sam.
But you can't leave poor old Bill behind in this forsaken place, Mr. Gandalf, cried Sam, angry and distressed. I won't have it, and that's flat, after he has come so far and all. I am sorry, Sam, said the wizard, but when the door opens, I do not think you will be able to drag your Bill inside, into the long dark of Moria. You will have to choose between Bill and your master. He'd follow Mr. Frodo into a dragon's den if I let him, protested Sam. It'd be nothing short of murder to turn him loose with all these wolves about. It will be short of murder, I hope, said Gandalf. He laid his hand on the pony's head and spoke in a low voice. Go with words of God and guiding on you, he said. You are a wise beast, and have learned much in Rivendell. Make your ways to places where you can find grass, and so come in time to Elrond's house, or wherever you wish to go. There, Sam, he will have quite as much chance of escaping wolves and getting home as we have.
Man, that is such a powerful passage. I mean, Sam is just heartbroken, and all I can think of is, if you must go, I wish you love. You'll never walk alone. I can't sing that. I'm terrible. Mostly because I'm not Steve Perry, never have been. But yeah,
Steve
I'm just
Perry
hearing
is a
separate
hard
ways
one.
in my. Oh yeah, I have to sing like 2 octaves lower,
Yeah.
or do terrible, unspeakable things to myself. But yeah, poor Sam. Poor Sam. You know, here we stand, worlds apart, hearts broken in two.
Yep.
And of the wolves, if he ever hurts you, true love won't desert you. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
It
Sorry,
works.
not
It
sorry.
works far too well.
It does, doesn't it? They're going there.
And now you know why
separate
Tolkien called this
ways.
chapter A Journey in the Dark.
A journey in the dark. That's simultaneously awful and perfect.
Right?
I'm not sure which is more true, but I love it either way. That's got to be the way it is. Yeah, no doubt. After all, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning. So,
right.
Oh, why is this going to be a very long chapter? We're going to have lots of terrible references, aren't we?
I'm kind of thinking we might need to come back to Wheel in the Sky when we get closer to the Dark Tower, huh?
Ooh, I think so. I think it does. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see,
By the time people listen to this, they'll know what we landed on for chapter titles.
That is
Excuse
true.
me, for episode titles. So.
That is true, yeah. And just don't stop believing in us, folks. That's all I can
Don't stop
ask.
believing.
Oh, goodness. All right.
We'll come to you with open arms.
Oh, no. This we have to stop. We have to stop. Otherwise, people are going to start asking who's crying now. So we're going to stop right now. All right.
Yes. Let's make our escape.
Yeah, we should. So Sam's, of course, his initial reaction, just flat out refusal. This is not going to happen. But Gandalf explains, listen, he's a horse. You know, he loves you, but he's not going to go into Moria. By the way, did you notice that the way Gandalf explains this to Sam, into the long dark of Moria? So that's, if you remember that great phrase from the movie, that this is the exact spot where they borrowed that wording. I thought that was a neat little thing.
That's right.
Every once in a while, they did that sort of thing where they pull the exact words from the text. And whenever they did, actually, that was always a nice moment, even if it was in a slightly different location.
Even if they gave it to a different character, which they did a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
But they usually had a reason for picking a character to give it to.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was some of my favorite stuff. I'd be watching the movies with my wife and just get really excited when I heard a line that I recognized from the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Sam tries to protest, right? He's not just going on emotions here. He's actually trying to argue that it's in Bill's best interest to keep him with him. He says it would be murder to let him go now because of those wolves.
Yeah.
And then Gandalf does something very interesting. He speaks to Bill with these words of guard and guiding. He's a little bit of a pony whisperer here.
Pony whisperer, I love it.
And what, is this a little bit of magia? Is this just a little bit of a blessing? What do you think this is?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of magia. I mean, he's.
I mean, I guess we can't
putting some sort of a blessing on him.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. A sort of a benediction,
Yeah. And when Gandalf speaks, there's power involved. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's truly magia or if it's just a nice blessing, but regardless, it does seem to work because. Well, yeah. And here's a little spoiler about Bill's destiny. If you skip ahead to Return to the King, Book 6, Chapter 7, the chapter Homeward Bound, that actually tells us Bill did make it back to Bree safely, and Sam's actually reunited with him there. I've got that text in front of me right now.
Oh, okay, great.
Barliman says, if you recollect Bill Fernie and the horse thieving, his pony as you bought, well, it's here. Come back all of itself it did. But where it had been to, you know better than me. It was as shaggy as an old dog and as lean as a clothes rail, but it was alive. Nobbs looked after it. What? My Bill? Cried Sam. Well, I was born lucky, whatever my gaffer may say. There's another wish come true. Where is he? Sam would not go to bed until he had visited Bill in his stable.
Aw, how cute.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
You're asking earlier whether Gandalf's words were a blessing or, some sort of magia. I mean, I suppose they could have been meaningless, and Gandalf could just have been rolling his eyes the whole time, like, whatever, Bill, just go. But, I'm going to say these nice things
I
so
don't think
Sam
he
doesn't
was.
cry anymore. No, I know, I'm just teasing. Gandalf being mean and just,
If it was Pippin, he might be mean to him.
Yeah, you're right. He might just kind of roll his eyes, giving Pippin a little blessing. Go with the grace of the whatever. Just get out of here because you're clueless. No, just
right.
He would never do that. He does end up showing a great deal of kindness to Pippin, but
of course he does. Yeah.
I love though that we see Bill's reaction. It's not in the text that you read, but right after that we get the reaction of the pony himself, and it does seem to be that he's got an awareness. He sort of says goodbye to Sam by putting his nose to Sam's ear and sort of nuzzling him. And it makes me feel like, yeah, maybe he does understand a little bit what's going on.
Yeah.
And Gandalf's blessing is helpful.
And then, Sam has this very, very emotional goodbye with Bill.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about Sam's reaction because I don't want to come across as too harsh to Sam here. I mean, I've had pets and I know how close, one can grow to an animal companion. I think this is a very beautiful, very sweet, emotional goodbye. I do wonder, though, I know sometimes Tolkien makes Sam, well, sometimes he makes him sort of like the emotional core of the Fellowship. And then sometimes he kind of makes Sam very naive and childlike and almost a little bit unrealistic about things. And I don't know. I don't know which this is. I don't know if Tolkien is truly saying that this is the appropriate level of emotion to have at saying goodbye to Bill, or if Tolkien is trying to, I don't know, show Sam as a little bit childlike in his reaction. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, I have thoughts. I'm not sure what the answer is. I think he is, like you pointed out, often the emotional core of the Fellowship. He's the one we look to for, the sentimental feeling, the heartfelt emotion of a moment. And that's good.
And we do certainly get that here, sort of unbridled emotion of this moment.
Unbridled, right? He bursts into tears, and then he just he throws the packs on the ground, and you could just see him sobbing while everybody else is sorting things out. He can't do anything. He's just absolutely brokenhearted about this. Is that appropriate? I don't know. It's understandable, and I think one of the things that we're supposed to feel for Sam is a real sympathy for a guy who feels everything really strongly. Frodo is a very logical person, right? Frodo thinks things through. Oh, well, I don't want to I don't want to have to be the one to destroy the ring, but nobody else can do it. So I guess I'm going to have to do it. He just kind of thinks if A, then B, and then B leads to C, and C leads me to go to Mordor. He just kind of thinks things through. He's very left-brained in a way. And Sam is, on the other hand, very, like you pointed out, emotional, sometimes naive, sometimes unrealistic. I think this is unrealistic in the sense that he should have known that Bill wouldn't be able to safely go into the mines. But then again, how would he know? He certainly has no experience with that sort of thing. It's not like the Shire is riddled with mines.
That's true. And none of them knew that they were going to be going through the mines in the first place. No. So it's not.
No, otherwise I don't think Elrond would have even sent them with a pony. Had
right.
Known.
Right.
Yeah.
So he certainly had reason to believe that he could have taken Bill a lot farther. And so even if he had known, even if he had known that he was going to have to say goodbye to Bill, that doesn't make it any easier, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Now that it is time to say goodbye, it does make sense that he would have this emotional reaction. And I think it does make sense. And it's a beautiful moment.
It is.
I wonder, because it all the action does seem to stop for this. I sometimes wonder what Tolkien is saying about it. But I think you're right. I think Sam is just very emotional, and he does sort of represent that pure, unbridled emotional response. And I think of all the Fellowship, he is the one that is the most open with his emotions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he doesn't, we've talked about filters before. He doesn't really have filters. He just says what he thinks, what he feels.
Yeah.
But, I think we understand, we talked about unrealistic and things like this, naivete or maybe immaturity. He makes the right decision. Later on in this chapter, we're going to see where he says, I didn't want to leave Bill. This is after, spoilers, after the Watcher attacks them. He says, I didn't want to leave him, but I have to choose you. I've got to go with you, Frodo. And there's no question where my loyalties lie. It's not with the horse, it's with Frodo. And that decision, I think, shows us that even though he's hurt beyond imagination here, he's still not so naive as to make the wrong decision.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll see that later.
And talk about, childishness. I mean, a childish response would have been absolute refusal to make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah, here he actually does the thing. He fumbles with the straps.
Yeah. A childish response might have been to say, well, no, I refuse to go anywhere without Bill. And,
Right.
either go without me
Sit
or
down
no,
on the
you're all going
ground.
to stay
Right.
here. There are many more childish responses to have. This is not, as I'm thinking about it more, I don't think it's a childish response at all. I think it's just a very heartfelt and a very honest emotional response.
And he even is the one to fumble with the straps and take the packs off. He doesn't leave
That's
that
true.
to somebody else. It's not as though
He doesn't
nobody
say,
else in
I'm
the
not going
party
to do
knows
it.
how to
Yeah.
do that. Right.
Right.
So,
That's true.
I would say this is, I might not address whether it's quote unquote appropriate or not, but it's certainly not, inappropriate. It's not over the top. And it's not especially naive, given that they thought perhaps they would be going away where they could keep him. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think that answers the question I had as I was reading this. So I've kind of come to a place where I'm happy with my reading.
Good.
Of it.
Well, I want you to be happy, Sean. That's what this show's
Thank
all
you.
about.
That's what this is all about, is making me happy. So
It's only taken us 154 episodes, but Sean is finally happy.
let's see how long it lasts, folks.
There you go. Yeah. Well, 5 minutes, because now I got to do a reading. All right. So they're going to be, Mary asking a logical question is where we're going to start. Well, here we are and all ready, said Mary. But where are the doors? I can't see any sign of them. Dwarf doors are not made to be seen when shut, said Gimli. They are invisible, and their own makers cannot find them or open them if their secret is forgotten. But this door was not made to be a secret known only to dwarves, said Gandalf, coming suddenly to life and turning round. Unless things are altogether changed, eyes that know what to look for may discover the signs. He walked forward to the wall. Right between the shadow of the trees, there was a smooth space, and over this he passed his hands to and fro, muttering words under his breath. Then he stepped back. Look, he said. Can you see anything now? The moon now shone upon the gray face of the rock, but they could see nothing else for a while. Then, slowly on the surface, where the wizard's hands had passed, faint lines appeared, like slender veins of silver running in the stone. At first they were no more than pale gossamer threads, so fine that they only twinkled fitfully where the moon caught them. But steadily they grew broader and clearer until their design could be guessed. At the top, as high as Gandalf could reach, was an arch of interlacing letters in an elvish character. Below, though the threads were in places blurred or broken, the outline could be seen of an anvil and a hammer, surmounted by a crown with 7 stars. Beneath these again were 2 trees, each bearing crescent moons. More clearly than all else, there shone forth in the middle of the door a single star with many rays. There are the emblems of Durin, cried Gimli. And that is the tree of the high elves, said Legolas. And the star of the house of Feanor, said Gandalf. They are wrought of Ithildin, that mirrors only starlight and moonlight, and sleeps until it is touched by one who speaks words now long forgotten in Middle-earth. Well, there you have it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning of the passage here.
As always.
Gandalf's staring, looking for the doors. They've come to the place, haven't found the doors just yet.
Doors should
He's
be
not
here.
the only one
I don't see
searching.
any doors. Yeah.
Right.
Gimli and Legolas searching as well. Gimli's, tapping the stone with his axe. Legolas is listening, trying to figure out where the door might be. Mm-hmm.
Glad they finally stopped getting jabs in at each other.
I know.
They took Gandalf's words to heart. For
Gimli
now.
wasn't tapping Legolas with his axe, so that's a start.
That would have been very bad.
That would have been.
Mary asks the question that everybody's thinking.
Exactly.
Well,
I'm almost surprised it
where are
wasn't
the doors?
Pippin, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah. And Gimli points out, dwarf doors are not made to be seen when shut. They're invisible.
Right.
And
right.
If you forget the secret, even their makers
doors
can't
are
find
gone.
those doors. Mm-hmm.
But that's the whole thing. Gandalf clarifies that, doesn't he? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's right. He says these weren't supposed to be secret doors. These are actually supposed to be public doors, so we should still be able to find them.
Yeah.
So I want to compare this to the entrance to the Lonely Mountain in The Hobbit so that we can see what a real secret dwarven door looks like.
Right.
In order to open the door to the Lonely Mountain, you had to stand by the gray stone when the thrush knocks and the setting sun with the last light of Durin's day will shine upon the keyhole.
Wow, yeah.
Very
specific set of circumstances.
We called our episode on that the Ministry of Silly Locks. I mean, this is a very elaborate Rube Goldberg kind of security system.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here at the Westgate.
At the exact right place, at the exact right time. That happens once a year. Or even less than that, right? Didn't
Not
we decide
even
that,
once a year, yeah.
That's right. It was a lot less than that. I mean, there was always a Dwarven New Year, but there wasn't always a Durin's Day.
Right.
So once every several years, you have to be there at the exact right time on sunset on that day, and a thrush needs to be knocking, and you need to be by the gray stone, and then
you still need to have
keyhole.
the key.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty crazy. This makes it like when you forget your password for a website and you have to deal with like an email and some sort of two-factor authentication. That's kind of a pain. That is nothing compared to the Dwarven Door on Erebor. Yeah,
exactly. So you compare that to the doors of Durin here. This is not a secret door. This is a pretty pretty straightforward door with a simple lock on it.
It would be nice though to see a sign that says the door is here. I mean some sort of something. But anyway, we do get this smooth space that seems like it's pretty evident that maybe the door is here, and so Gandalf breathes this air kind of like you would to fog up a mirror or something like that.
That's exactly.
And then as the moon shines, we get these faint lines and we get pale gossamer threads. Oh, it's so beautiful, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, there's something about the word gossamer. Anytime I read it, it's just it's pretty word. It's one of those words that sounds right for what it means.
It does, yeah.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to do a little sidebar on moon phases, get a little astronomical pedantry in here. And I'm going to have to preface that I'm going to have to lean heavily on Hammond and Skull for this one, because I do not have the astronomical knowledge to pull this one off myself.
Okay.
But Hammond and Skull rightly point out that on this evening, which is January 13th, the moon could not possibly shine on a westward-facing surface in the evening. It would rise in the east after sunset and set the next day after sunrise.
Yeah.
Now, the reason for that is because it had been full 5 nights earlier.
Right.
After covering various changes in manuscripts, they go to Christopher Tolkien in Treason of Isengard, who says that my father had said that 6 nights before, the first night march of the company from Holland, the moon was almost at the full, and on the previous night, when the wargs attacked again, the night was old, and westward the waning moon was setting.
Okay.
My father had forgotten this, and as he wrote the present version, he evidently saw a young moon in the west, shining on the edge of sunset. When he realized that the moon must now be almost into its last quarter and rising late, he changed the text. But surely the reference to the moon shining on the cliff face should have been removed with all the others.
Indeed. In fact, Hammond and Skull, they edited the 2004 edition of The Lord of the Rings, and they even considered changing the text to reconcile this, but private correspondence with Christopher led them not to do so. He said to them, I suspect that my father saw the scene at the doors of Moria as moonlit, but the need to get the moon's phase consistent was at odds with this.
So it seems like that was one of those cases of something that was just too important to the story itself, despite the little factual
visual
error.
Exactly. The visuals of the scene mattered in this case,
Yeah. I do not envy them the task of deciding what changes to make to the text and what things to keep
what
the
a
same.
burden that is, right?
But to think of having to make a decision on whether to change one of the most iconic scenes in the entire book. Yeah. And
you really couldn't do that.
Let's talk about how iconic this door is. Now we finally get the design appearing. The page that has the door on it, that has the picture of the door on it, is actually going to come up in our next episode, I guess. But
well, I mean, it's there. It's I think we can go ahead and take a look at it.
We can talk about some of the symbolism, certainly, because it's mentioned in the text, isn't it?
Yeah. So we got the anvil and hammer and the crown with 7 stars. Now, both of these are the emblems of Durin that Gimli mentions.
That's right. And we're going to get a little bit more on this symbol later in this chapter. So
we will.
Stay tuned for that. Not this episode. It'll probably be, 2 or 3.
Next one or the one after that, probably.
Yeah. We also have 2 trees bearing crescent moons. Now, Legolas says it's the tree, singular, of the High Elves, but apparently it's the same tree twice. Hammond and Skull point out that the 1966 index to the book identifies the tree of the High Elves as Galathilion. For those who don't remember all the details from Season 1, Galathilion, in the Silmarillion, was a tree like to a lesser image of Telperion, save that it did not give light of its own being. And it was made for the elves by Yavanna, And the name Galathilion means tree of shining silver in Sindarin.
That's right. And beneath that, we see the single star with many rays. Now, this might very well represent one of the Silmarils. Now, yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool, that connection. You may have seen many of Tolkien's heraldic devices. One of them showed 3 Silmarils, each with 8 points. Well, the 1966 index, again, for The Lord of the Rings, says that this star had 8 rays. And in the device that Tolkien drew for Feanor, at the very center is a small 8-pointed star. So, yeah, here's a Silmaril, folks, the sign of the House of Feanor. So let's break out that pinata, shall we?
Let's bash the pinata and see if some Silmarils come out.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't it, though? I don't know.
Yeah, but if there's only one, who's going to pick it up? You or me?
Right.
And I don't know about you.
Touch it.
I'm not going to. No,
it'll wither my unclean flesh.
Yeah. I hate to think what would happen if I picked it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm remembering, as you're talking about some of those heraldic devices, I'm remembering some of those heraldic devices appear in Artist and Illustrator. I'm not sure if
yes, they do. Quite a few of them do. I don't know. I'll have to take a look. And I know that those images aren't necessarily available online either. So
yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll take a look into that for the postscript.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure that there is a Silmaril in the more elaborate color heraldic device for Feanor as well.
Yeah, there is.
And remember that the reason for it appearing here on the door is not because the elves who made this were members of the Feanor fan club. You know, they weren't those hashtag Feanor did nothing wrong people. This is actually a reference, right?
There's a subreddit I never need to be a part of. What was that? I don't even want to give them.
I think it is actually
Feanor did nothing wrong.
Feanor did nothing wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, though, actually, if you listen to us and you agree with us about Feanor, go ahead and join that subreddit and just troll them. Anyway,
I joined it just to read it and just for the kind of the entertainment value. It's just
it's like a train wreck. It's hilarious. Yeah, I agree.
But no, these aren't Feanor fans who did this. No. This is actually a reference to his house. Remember, Celebrimbor was his grandson.
Right, absolutely. I mean, not only is he Feanor's grandson, he's the son of Curufin. Now, wisely, he sort of disowned his father. So, that does qualify him as a fairly decent fellow in our book. That goes a long way. But yeah, it's just the House of Feanor, so it's,
That's right. Of course, we haven't seen his name yet. We'll get to that when we get to the words in the next episode.
That's right. We're not going to talk about those words yet, not the words on the door, but we do have some words to talk about currently. Ithildine, right?
Yeah.
Or
This word, Ithildine. Gandalf translates this as star moon later in the chapter. According to Words, Phrases, and Passages in Lord of the Rings, which is Parma Eldalambron number 17, technically means moon starlight. Now, moon in Sindarin is Ithil, which in Quenya is Isil, and tin, Tin, means spark or sparkle, especially used of the twinkle of stars. It's actually related to Varda's epithet Tintale, the kindler.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Or Tinuviel, right?
That's right. Tinuviel, daughter of the twilight is what it literally means, although it's a name for the nightingale. And what happens is when you combine those two elements, the T turns to a D. It basically gets voiced and turns into a D. Yep.
That makes sense. And that Isil, of course, let's go back to Isildur. It's the same root as Ithil. Minas Ithil and Isildur are the same, same root there for
that is correct. Yep.
Fascinating. I love that. Well, let's jump ahead a little bit and learn where it comes from. That is to say, where Ithildine comes from. Later in this chapter, Gandalf talks about Mithril and says, among other things, the elves dearly loved it, and among many uses they made of it Ithildine, star moon, which you saw upon the doors. Now, the silver that reflects the moonlight and starlight on the doors, then, is Mithril.
That's right. It's a mithril derivative of some kind.
Yeah, it's sort of like a gold leaf, but it's like a mithril leaf. It's some sort of way of, I don't know, maybe they melted it and poured it into the I don't know how you would do that.
I don't know. Do they make an ink out of it? Is it a plating of some kind? I don't know.
Yeah, it must be some sort of plating. I don't know. We don't know. We don't know. The text doesn't tell us.
No, we don't know, and we are not metallurgists or
no, we are not
anything of the kind.
We're not much of anything really. We're just a couple of guys.
We're just a couple of guys with copies of Lord of the Rings and a few other
Sean's
books.
just this guy, And
I always tell people I'm just a guy with a few books and a microphone.
There you go.
And
a little bit too much time on your hands.
That's right, yeah. Increasingly less time, the deeper we get into this thing.
Boy, you're not kidding. Yeah, absolutely.
But, I was wondering about whether Ithilien was the same as the moon runes in The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Both of them can only be read in certain kinds of moonlight. I mean, there are some differences because we find out here that Ithilien appears in moonlight or starlight, whereas moon runes only appear when the moon shines behind them. And then if we, again, go back to The Hobbit, Chapter 3, the more cunning sort can only be read by a moon of the same shape and season as when they were written.
That's right, yeah.
So there are some differences there. Now, to be fair, again, this is a front door. This isn't a secret map. So it does make sense that the security would be higher on Thror's map in The Hobbit than on this door.
Yeah.
But it does seem possible that the moon runes of the map are some kind of specialized type of Ithilien. We just can't say with any certainty.
Well, the moon runes are said to be written with a silver pen. And that could be a reference to, like a form of true silver, which is what Mithril is. So, yeah,
That's true.
It's not a stretch to say they're likely related, but the text doesn't give us any freedom to say that with certainty.
Right. We don't have any kind of formulas for how to make Ithilien out of Mithril or moon runes out of Ithilien. So,
no, wouldn't that be nice if we did?
Sorry, folks. That would be a wonderful crafting
wouldn't it?
Thing to do. Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Set up an Etsy shop and everything. You could sell.
You would. It would be a very expensive Etsy shop, though.
Absolutely.
I mean, who are you going to get to go brave the halls of Durin's Bane to get you more Mithril?
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's hard to find.
Well, folks, we may have just brought out the Feanor Pinata to, just in time to wrap things up, but we're still not done. We do have Bartleman's Bag coming your way here in just a minute. Some great questions tonight. And even when that's done, the talk continues all night long at the Prancing Pony.
That's right. We've always got lots of discussion happening in our social media spaces. At our common room on Facebook, you'll find comments, questions, corrections, and more on every episode, as well as updates from us throughout the week. Just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook and click the like and follow buttons.
And now we have another common room on Reddit. You can find great discussions there over at r/PrancingPonyPod. And as always, you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram with the handle @PrancingPonyPod. So follow us wherever you happen to be. And if you like us, please share us on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, really anywhere that you can find Tolkien fans.
And if you really want to let the world know your feelings about us, especially if they're good feelings, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more reviews we have, the more visible our podcast is. That helps others find us and this great community of Tolkien fans we've built together.
And if you'd like access to some exclusive content like our episode postscripts, quarterly full-length specials, PPP swag, or more, check out patreon.com/prancingponypod to find out how you can join the fellowship of the podcast. Now, I think it's time to see what old Bartleman has in the mailbag for us tonight. Sean, what do we have?
Well, first up today, Stephen B. in Michigan wrote to us with a question about the always mysterious Dwarvish language. Stephen said, "We know the native names of the two Beleriand-adjacent Khazad settlements, Gabil-Gatal and Tumunzahar, and we know a number of mountains and waterways in the area of Khazad-dûm. Dark are the waters of Keled-Zaram, and cold are the springs of Kibil-Nala. But do we know anything about the Khuzdul names of the dwarven settlements in Erebor and the Iron Hills?"
Oh, man. I don't know. What level of word nerdery is this?
Well, higher than mine, Alan. Certainly higher than my level in Khuzdul word nerdery. So, I called a lifeline for this question.
Oh, good.
Remember our old friend, the Dwaro Scholar?
Absolutely.
He wrote to us back in Season 1 to help us with our Khuzdul pronunciation.
Yes, he did. Now, folks, if you haven't seen his site, you really need to go check it out at dwaroscholar.com. That's DWARROW scholar.com. His mission is to share his knowledge and passion of Tolkien's dwarves, and his site is about all things Dwarvish. He's got Dwarvish language video lessons, runic writing exercises, dictionaries, and all kinds of useful stuff for you or the Khuzdul word nerd in your life. Sean, I'm getting you a lifetime subscription.
Thank you very much. He's also on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, so go check out his website and you'll find all the links for where to contact him. So anyway, that's what I did. I reached out to Roy, the Dwaro Scholar. I was pretty sure that there was nothing in Tolkien's own texts or notes that gave Khuzdul names for Erebor or the Iron Hills, but I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I know you're the guy to ask." And guess what? He was.
Of course.
Here was his answer. First of all, he confirmed for me that Tolkien never gave the Khuzdul names for the settlements of Erebor and Iron Hills, so there's nothing in any of Tolkien's official materials. In Neo-Khuzdul, Now, that's the reconstructed, usable Khuzdul language developed by David Salo from Tolkien's materials and that was used in the Peter Jackson movies. He says in that you will find several names for locations in this region, or the names of these regions themselves.
Okay.
For Erebor, the most common one is Urd, simply meaning the mountain, which is a Dwarvish Ereborianism that perhaps surprisingly comes from the Sylvan Elvish Orth. This makes sense, however, as Erebor was settled late in Dwarvish history, and the dwarves used the name used by the Dalemen, Orth, which they had in turn borrowed from the Sylvan elves in the area.
Okay.
Since this was the only mountain of significance to the dwarves of Erebor, he said, the word became an Ereborism. In other words, they called it the mountain, kind of the way hobbits call the hill, or they call the shire the shire. It's the only one, so that's what they call it. He said it was not used by dwarves of other houses, who would go with Abad Zesulul, literally mountain lonely. The term Urdek, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing half of these, is commonly used to refer to the halls within the mountain in Neo-Khuzdul. As for Iron Hills, Urad Zirnul or Zirin Hanad are commonly used, the latter the general term, while the former is a term used by those of Erebor.
Okay.
Apart from those, he said, there are several other words for these locations and settlements which are listed in the Dwarvish dictionary on his site, mainly epithets and some slang versions.
My goodness. Guess it's good to have somebody who can answer questions that we can't.
I know. That was, when I read that, I was just like, I knew he was the guy to go to, and wow, he did not disappoint. No. So thank you very much, Roy, the Dwaro Scholar. And Stephen, I hope that helps. And if you or anyone else is interested in finding out more, go check out dwaroscholar.com or look for him on social media. As you can tell, he's a brilliant guy, and he's got some fantastic material available.
Indeed, he does. So what else do we have, Sean?
Well, while we're on the topics of dwarves and their favorite hangouts, all those frowning stones and stern-faced cliffs we talked about earlier made me think of another question we got not too long ago about another metaphorical term related to stone. Lacey wrote to us back in October of last year to ask us, I'm currently reading through The Hobbit with you, back on episode 73. Now, that was when we covered the beginning of chapter 9, Barrels Out of Bond. She said, I was curious about this phrase used to describe the Elven King's Hall, with pillars hewn out of the living stone. Lacey says, what do you make of this term living stone? Are there any other uses of this phrase in the legendarium? What makes stone living as opposed to not? And she wondered if it might be a way of differentiating the Elven King's approach to living with his environment from the Goblin caves or something like that. But she also said, grammatically, hewn out of the living stone seems to imply something inherent about the stone, regardless of the hall's inhabitants. Do you have any speculations as to what exactly Tolkien means by this description? And finally, she did some speculation on whether the Elven King's Halls are supposed to be another place that's kind of alive, kind of like the Old Forest. It's, sort of alive and personified a little bit. She said she did some Google searches. She got some hits on it. She even found some biblical passages, but it didn't really seem like any of those were really explanatory as to why Tolkien used that phrase here.
Right. All I can think of, though, is if we've got living stone and they're near another living stone, might they become stones in love?
I was thinking Dr. Livingstone, I presume.
Oh, I was thinking Journey songs because this is Journey in the Dark. And so I was thinking they could be stones in love.
See, you're just a step ahead of me with the Journey knowledge, man. I can't.
I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, actually, to be one step ahead of you on Journey knowledge.
We can pretend it's an insult, but I think we all know it's really a compliment.
There you go. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and take a look then at the passage and answer her question of whether it appears anyplace else in Tolkien. Now, first off, there is the passage that she mentioned from chapter 9 of The Hobbit. In a great hall with pillars hewn out of the living stone sat the Elven King on a chair of carven wood. Similar phrase used to describe the stairs into the Lonely Mountain in chapter 13. These were smooth, cut out of the living rock, broad and fair, and up the dwarves went. Now, that same phrase, living stone, is also used to describe Menegroth in chapter 10 of the Silmarillion. No surprise there, since the Elven King and his halls are largely inspired by Thingol and Menegroth.
That's true.
Now there, it says, beyond the gates, wide passages ran down to high halls and chambers, far below, that were hewn in the living stone. Now, we also get an instance of living rock in chapter 5 of the Silmarillion. The gate of the harbor of Alqualande was an arch of living rock, sea-carved. We also get one occurrence of each of these in The Lord of the Rings, both of which occur in the Two Towers. One is in reference to Durin's tower in the Silvertine, Zirag Zigil, and the other is in reference to the Gate of Isengard. So while it is used many times in reference to Elvish places, it's also used twice to refer to Dwarvish places and once to a place built by men. So I agree with what Lacey says that this is talking about the stone itself and not the inhabitants. So what did we find on the phrase itself?
Well, I always understood the phrase living stone or living rock to mean stone that hasn't been separated from the earth yet. Something that's carved into the living stone it's like carved into the mountain or the cliff. It's not something that's been quarried out and shaped and then placed back. It's just been carved out, sort of
where it exists in nature.
Where it existed, yeah. I looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, and it does look like that understanding was correct. One definition given for living in the Oxford English Dictionary is of rock or stone in its native condition and site, as part of the Earth's crust, forming part of a natural mass. Yeah. So, it's rock or stone that has not been removed from where it was formed. It's been shaped without removing it. Now, the metaphorical sense of that, I think, is pretty clear when you think about it. Obviously, rock isn't really alive the way plants and animals are, but you can certainly metaphorically see a piece of a mountain as being sort of like a limb or an appendage, and then once it gets cut off, it becomes dead. Living stone, by contrast, has not been cut off. It's actually a very old metaphor in English, too. The OED cites a very clear parallel occurrence referring to a cave of living stone in a 1674 translation of the Latin epic poem Aeneid. The translation was done by John Dryden. There are also occurrences of living stone in 1484 and even as far back in 653 in an Old English poem by Cunewulf, whom my fellow Eärendil fans should remember. So that's what it means, Lacey. The pillars hewn out of the living stone in the Elven King's halls were actually carved out of the rock and are still of a single piece of stone with the floor and the ceiling. Really quite an image.
Yeah, it is. Well, do we have time for one more?
I think we do, if it's a short one. Mitchell S. wrote to us to ask a few questions. I'll mention two of them here. He said, First of all, if you could spend an hour with Tolkien, but couldn't ask him anything related to the Legendarium, what would you discuss or ask him? And he also asked, what would come out of the Feanor Pinata when you hit it?
Oh, I can answer that one really fast.
Oh, yeah. I told him ashes and spite, but what would you say?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking tones of arrogance, a light note of bitterness, a slight aftertaste of self-righteousness, and just a hint of smokiness on the finish.
Oh, well done.
Yeah,
well done.
Well, we try.
That's awesome. Well, what about the first one, the serious one? What's the one topic or question you'd want to talk to Tolkien about if it couldn't be about the Legendarium?
Man, nothing about the Legendarium. That's tough, but I think I'd ask him about Leaf by Niggle. I think I understand much of the allegory, but I'd really love to hear it from the man himself. I think it's my favorite non-Legendarium story, and I'd want to talk to him a little bit about it.
Sure.
If there was time, I'd talk about Mythopoeia and maybe that desire that we all have to be sub-creators.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably ask him about the Gothic language. It's the earliest Germanic language for which we have any significant corpus of texts. It dates to late Roman times. But unlike so many other so-called dead languages like Latin, it doesn't have any direct descendants that are still around today. No. So I just find it fascinating for that reason. And I know Tolkien was also fascinated by it. He even wrote some poetry in it, which I think we've talked about before. Right. So I just think it would be a really cool conversation to have with him.
I agree. Well, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But please be sure to join us again next week when we, too, utter words in Sindarin that have absolutely no effect.
It's a little bit like Gandalf trying all the keys on the keychain, but trying to look cool while doing it.
That's right. Yeah, I'm just I think it might be this one. I don't know. Let's try it. Anyway, as always, folks, we want to thank each of you for listening, but we also want to give a very special thank you to our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier. Those are DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Bruce in California, Mario in Utah, Seth in Texas, and Ella in California. Thank you all so very much.
Make sure you don't miss a single episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, and most of all, the emblems on your hidden door to barlaman@theprancingponypodcast.com.
Barlaman's not always punctual with the mail. In fact, he almost never is. But we'll get back to you as soon as we can, and your question or comment may be featured on an upcoming show.
When he's on time, it's just the exception that proves the rule. But,
Exactly.
Yeah. This has been, as always, far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.